All right, hey everyone. So this is the start of something slightly new. We've spent the last few videos talking about exploring just a single quantitative variable. Now we're going to shift focus and explore just a single categorical variable instead. And so just as kind of a reminder, what we're doing now is we're just kind of exploring data. We're not doing any formal statistical analysis yet. All we're doing is looking at different graphs for ways to visualize data and different summaries to look at data numerically. And so let's keep on using our data set on these 2010 baseball players, but now let's add in the pitchers. And so remember, those were removed at the very beginning, so we were just looking at players that weren't pitchers and looking at their home runs. And so after we add in pitchers, there are 1,199 players in the data set. And so one categorical variable that we can explore is this position variable. And so this is what position the player is in. And so it's not really super important if you're not a baseball person to know what all of these positions mean. I'll run through them quickly just in case you are interested. So there's a first base player, second baseman, third baseman. There's outfielders, shortstops, designated hitters, catchers, and pitchers. And then this means that the position wasn't recorded, so we're not really sure what these people are over here. And so the graph that we're using to visualize this is just a bar plot. It has a y-axis of count and an x-axis is our variable of interest. And so we could just see that there are about 70 first basemen, about 70 second basemen, 70 third basemen, about 225 outfielders, etc. So all it does is let us see how many different players are in these different positions. One thing to note that's interesting is that there are a ton of pitchers. And so that's kind of true in Major League Baseball, that a ton of the players are pitchers because they have to switch them out so often to kind of rest their arms. So that's kind of something interesting that we can see from this graph. All right, and so a caution here is that we might be tempted to describe like the shape like we did with histograms. And so we might be tempted to say that like, oh, this looks like it's left skewed because it has this long left tail. That's not accurate though. And the reason we can't do that is because these positions are just ordered arbitrarily. If we simply change the order of positions, then all of a sudden this now looks right skewed with like a right tail. And so that's why it simply just doesn't really make sense to talk about shape when we have a categorical variable, because it's going to look different depending on what order we put these different player positions in. And so what happens when we switch the order? Well, then we get a completely different shape. And so then we just want to say something like, all right, well, since ordering the categories is completely arbitrary, then that means that the distribution of a categorical variable does not have shape. All right. Just like we did with histograms, we could also change the y-axis from counts to proportions. And so sometimes it's nice to do that. We see that it's easier to tell that like just under half of the players in the data set are pitchers, whereas before it's a little bit harder to see what proportion this is when the y-axis is count. And then finally, we can make a table that has these counts and proportions. And so this is typically the form that you would see like a summary table for a single categorical variable. We see the different counts, so there's 71 third basemen, 226 outfielders, etc. And then these proportions are just calculated as the count divided by the sample size, which was 1199. And so you could do that for each of these to get the proportions. All right, so that's really it for a single categorical variable. It's probably the simplest possible case. We're not even going to have a handout on this, and we're just going to jump to some more interesting settings. So as always, though, definitely let me know if you have any questions.